thanks very much to our newest partner, HelpSystems, our business partners, and also to the IBM Power community for today's webinar on Bring in the Bots, Unlocking Automation Potential in Enterprise Systems. This webcast is going to be all about robotic process automation, or RPA, which is one of the fastest growing areas of IT business investment in 2020. So to set the stage, I have our first poll question for the community, which will be popped up on your screens now. And that is basically, what is your level of understanding of RPA? So what is your exposure? And the answers range from, we've automated several business processes in production, we're piloting our first RPA project, we're evaluating RPA vendors, just gathering information, or we are already as automated as we can possibly be. Okay, let's see our results. So perhaps not very surprisingly, no one is automated or piloting, but really the bulk of you are gathering information, which is what we'd expect, and we hope that we'll arm you with the right kind of information today so that you can figure out what RPA means and what it could mean for your business. And then there are some of you, that 14%, that say that you're already as automated as you can possibly be. And that is possible also. So the community webcast is going to feature, as I said, a detailed overview of RPA followed by a live demonstration on the IBM I. And to start things off, I'll make introductions. Pat Cameron of HelpSystems and Roger Hamler, our Director of Products and Services, will be talking after me. Today's RPA landscape, HelpSystems, which is Pat's, followed by Roger doing a demonstration and an example, RPA bots, and we'll tell you how you can get your hands on RPA and a very low risk way of getting some experience here to see if it will work in your organization, and followed by a question and answer period. So some of you may not be familiar with CM First Group. We are headquartered in Austin. We're partnered with top IBM I as well as Z technology firms, IBM, CA Technologies, Broadcom, HelpSystems, and we've helped over 400 enterprises since 2010. So put that little blurb in there, and then transfer control over to Pat. Welcome, Pat.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This should be, hopefully, you'll learn a few things about RPA. So RPA, or Robot Process Automation, one of the latest buzzwords out there, is a type of automation technology currently transforming the way businesses operate. RPA software robots manipulate and communicate with business systems and applications to streamline processes and reduce the burden on your human employees. A robotic process automation solution will stand out from other types of automation due to its flexibility. We'll show you some examples of that today. And its ability to efficiently integrate workflows across your entire enterprise. RPA can automate integration between existing systems, existing applications, and workflows under a central automation platform. And the beauty of it is you don't have to make expensive hardware changes, or you don't have to change your existing applications. RPA can integrate them just as they are, so you don't have to reprogram them to run in batch, for example. RPA enables innovation and collaboration between IT and your business teams by centralizing automation and connecting data across various applications. I think you'll find that there are probably islands of automation around your office or in your data center now. I know years ago when I was an operations manager, I used to write little CL programs to help me automate things. That was many years ago. And so now with a platform like Automate, you can consolidate all those islands, add security, add auditing, and again, create that automation right on top of your existing applications. RPA helps you scale your digital workforce very cost effectively. Software robots are easy to configure and work alongside human employees to enable rapid growth. You can have a digital assistant that runs reports for you, lots of different things. We'll talk about those as we go on. And then one of the things that RPA does that probably not a lot of other software packages do is able to mimic the manual tasks that are being done by your workforce currently. And what that does then is frees them up to do the strategic work that adds value to your business instead of spending their day copying and pasting data. So robotic process automation solutions are designed to boost productivity, improve accuracy, and I really think that the improve accuracy is sometimes even more important than boosting productivity. Because if your applications are always going to run without errors, you're not going to have downtime because somebody put the wrong date in when a nightly ran or when some reports ran or your invoice ran. And so improving accuracy, they always run exactly the same way every time. And also help your organization grow by handling those repetitive manual workloads, hand those over to your software robots, and again, let your people work on more strategic applications. Automate can execute behind the glass. That's one of the terms that you'll hear, or those are more like background tasks, accessing data directly from a database, or using a web service to get data from one application, sending it to another. Those would be considered kind of back end or behind the glass processes. Front of glass are those tasks that require some type of an active desktop. They need to run on a server or workstation and maybe do things like log into a portal or an application or a terminal and enter commands, point and click on objects on the screen to generate a report, for example. So those types of tasks are really what sets RPA apart from other orchestration or scheduling tools. We kind of look at Automate as middleware that integrates disparate applications and moves data between them in whatever format that file movement is required. Often a workflow in Automate will be maybe a combination of front of glass and back of glass. So you might have inputs to this process that are captured from an email, an electronic form, or a database, and that will trigger then a workflow to kick off one or more processes to process those files. RPA has lots of names, as you can see. Virtual Assistant is one of our favorites since it focuses on helping you get your work done, but not taking over your job. Just making your life a little bit easier. So the IT department is typically a big user of automation. In IT departments, Automate can be used to just schedule and run those back office business processes and flows. Any executable can be run as part of an automation. These are IT processes that are normally done during the day or maybe run after hours to keep that business operational. This might include things like report generation or email automation, reading and writing to and from databases. Automation can help with your network and service monitoring as well, and more. The software can also be used to interact with and automate many development operation processes that are used in today's DevOps environment. File movement and file management are two areas where RPA really does shine. Automation assures that those files will be sent to your vendors securely and on time. It moves files around within your network as well. So all file management tasks are also documented and audited as well by the Automate product. Software updating and testing are also great areas to look for automation. If you're writing a bunch of PowerShell scripts to do that now, you can probably consolidate that within an RPA product. So it would make sense to take a look at how much time do your system administrators spend updating software, testing new versions, etc. Much of that work can be automated and centrally managed, which I think, again, is the big advantage of an RPA tool, is the ability to centrally manage all of those processes. Onboarding new employees is also an area where many of our current customers use Automate. Automate has an interface to Active Directory, which allows you to send to Active Directory the information about the new employee, and then Automate will go ahead and do the rest. And I've got an example of a workflow that I can show you in a bit that creates new users in Active Directory, creates user profiles for them on their IBM I, and then maybe enters them into your HR system or another application that they need to be entered in as well. Business department uses. So in business department division, so the nice thing about RPA is typically it's user friendly. So it's often used to automate those kind of time consuming data entry processes and data extraction processes that are normally done by users. And they might be using data entry in Windows or a web application, or often copying and pasting data between applications. I just read somewhere that cut and paste is the most common application integration method. And I'm sure that that sounds familiar to many of us. Eliminating or reducing data entry or entering the same data into multiple systems is a key benefit to implementing RPA automation. It can quickly justify the software implementation and the cost, and the ROI is easy to calculate based on those daily manual tasks. How long does it take to do it? Who's doing it? What is their pay? And you can get your ROI. I've got a little story I can tell about that later for one of our customers. So who should build these automation processes? In a business department, it might include somebody like a business analyst or somebody that's got macro building skills. You don't need to be a programmer to build these tasks, but you do have to have logic. So typically, the people that will do that building are familiar with analyzing and implementing new processes. Again, if they're familiar with macro building, absolutely they can build RPA automation. And then in the IT areas, creators of automation can include operations and network administrators, as well as developers if needed. So it's always nice to have some IT help for the business units as well. So capabilities of RPA and Automate. They're very flexible. Like I said, they require no coding to put into production. These back of glass tasks on the left here, things like file transfers, database actions, monitoring inbound email, and executing web service requests can all be done in the background so that you can execute multiple tasks simultaneously. We've got customers that are running thousands of tasks every day. Front of glass then is typically mimicking what a human does. Log into a website, point and click, and move the mouse to objects on the screen. If the application that you need to automate doesn't have an API that can be used to interface with it, Automate can always use its interactive automation actions. Automate is the great integrator. It can integrate two separate applications using any number of functions. As I mentioned, Automate supports many types of APIs, SOAP or REST APIs, but again, if it's not available, then there's always the standard RPA integration of recording mouse clicks and movement and executing from a command line as well. A few examples of how RPA can be used in your business. Again, web browser and graphical user interface automation, logging into portals and websites, terminal sessions either, I have an example of that. Data extraction, extracting data from the source and sending it to the target. And it really doesn't matter where the source and the target are. This is typically how RPA is used to integrate between applications. I might scrape data from a website and send it to a database, or opposite. Lots of customers are using Automate for creating and distributing reports and files. FTP, lots of users using RPA for FTP. Standard and secure FTP are supported, as well as encryption and compression of those files before that transfer occurs. Email automation is a huge time saver for people. So you might have a group that are waiting for an invoice to come in or a PO so that it can be processed as soon as it arrives. Automating that email processing saves time and frees up staff, again, for more strategic tasks. And Automate can also do some monitoring of applications and servers, making sure that the response time is acceptable, making sure that the services that are required are up and active, and then if there is some type of a problem, can notify the help desk or even integrate with your help desk software and open up a ticket for you. So what I have here is a picture of our task builder. This is kind of the foundation of everything Automate. And you'll see this live in a bit. Roger's going to show you that. But over on the left side of the screen, on this one, it says Active Directory, and then it's got a list of all the different Active Directory type actions we can take. And so what you'll do when you build a task is you document the steps, and then you drag and drop the step. It will open up this template that we have here. So when I'm going to create a new user in Active Directory, I need to know the user's first name and last name. What's that login going to look like? It will create a temporary password for them, etc. And whoever is building this doesn't have to write any PowerShell scripts for this or anything. Everything can be done with these templates or forms. This is just a quote from one of our customers who is using Automate to look at 2 different reports coming from 2 different applications. These happen to be on the IBM I to see if they balance, instead of having to have an operator or somebody in accounting go out and find those reports and actually look at them and see if they balance. We can create a workflow within Automate that will do that for you. So this is a workflow that's got multiple steps in it. These little gray boxes are individual tasks. Over on the left, I've got a couple triggers, an email trigger. I'm monitoring an inbox for this invoice report, and I'm also monitoring a file on my network. When those reports are created and come in, I will trigger these tasks to run. Once those 2 reports are here and they're successful, then I've got another task that will find the totals line on each of those, or on each page, and capture the value and see if they balance. If they do, it will go ahead and process the invoices. If not, we'll notify the help desk, open up a ticket, and let somebody know. So think of a lot of those different types of tasks that you think can't be automated. They absolutely can with an RPA tool. Now, this is an application that we have here at HelpSystems. This is our HA application. And what you have to do to make sure that your 2 systems or LPARs are in sync is you have to log into the system and you have to view this screen. And you can see over on the right-hand side in the white here, I've got a bunch of errors. But when we're demoing this product, we didn't want to have to do that. We wanted to make sure that everything was up and running and there weren't any errors. So what we did is we built a task that will go ahead and do that for me. So here's my task that logs into my IBM I. We have a terminal. You can see over here on the left, we've got a terminal action. And what that will do, it will connect to your terminal, and I'm using 5250 emulation. Enter my user, enter my password, press the enter key, and I think I've got a couple of extra enters here so we can get past that screen if I'm already logged in somewhere else. And then it will go through and it will start reading those screens to see if there are any enters. So again, it's a matter of dragging that terminal action over from the left. Now I'm going to start looping through those records that are on the screen. And then if there are any errors, I'm going to send an email out to let somebody know that there's an error. So when this runs, it will do exactly that. So it's going to log into my IBM I, go into my application. So this could be any application that you have where you need to enter information, again, do any kind of screen scraping. You can use Automate to do that. You can see in the back there, it's looping through the records on the screen. And then when it's finished, there were a couple of errors there left. You'll see I've got an email here that tells me exactly which file and library where the error was. So that's one way to use RPA. This one is an example of data scraping from a website. Now, I can only use public sites for my demonstration, so this is UPS. But think if you have any applications where there's a web browser as the user interface, and you need to read and write data from those screens. So in this case, what I'm doing is I've got a list of tracking numbers here, and I want to enter them into the UPS site. Then what I want to do is scrape that data about the delivery, where and when, and write it over to the Excel spreadsheet over on the left. So you can see my task running in the background. There's my spreadsheet, gets the data, plugs it into that spreadsheet when it's finished. And again, this could be any application that has some type of a browser interface. Let's take a look at another one. User provisioning and onboarding of new employees. Lots of customers are using Automate for that. So your input could be coming from an electronic form, an email, somebody in HR, could be a database update. And what that can do is it can trigger that automation that will go ahead and add that new user, and you can have it add those users, excuse me, to any application that's required for that user. So in this case, I have an input file here. I have my 3 Patricias, and I need to add them into Active Directory. I also need to create user profiles for them on the IBM I. So this first task is creating the users in Active Directory. There's nothing exciting to see. That's all done in the background. As soon as that's finished, it's going to log into my IBM I, and I'm just running the create user profile command. I prompt it so people can see the prompting, and it creates those new users for me. And then when that's finished, I've got a little data entry menu here. It can take those same users from that spreadsheet, and this could be an example of putting in into their HR system or your finance system. It's just an example of a GUI interface, a Windows interface instead of a browser. And then I send out an email with their new password and their profile on those systems. So a couple of examples of different ways that you can use Automate every day. A couple of things about the requirements gathering that you need to consider before when you're starting out. Often people get kind of overwhelmed because you can think of lots of different things to automate. So we can help you prioritize where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So this requirements process is just the same for any process that you want to automate. Just initially create like a simple bulleted list or an outline of the steps that you want to automate. Once you have that documentation, what does the human do? Then you can take a look at it and you can decide if this task indeed can be automated. So a couple things to look for: can the inputs be driven from an email message or help desk ticket or a file or a database? If so, we can probably automate that task. And then what types of decisions have to be made while that task is running? And does it need some type of manual input most of the time or not? Typically they don't. Even if you have to enter a date or some other variable, that can all be put into your automate task and entered at execution time. So the things to look for are, is this process consistent? Is it predictable? And is it repeatable? And if that's true, then chances are that this process can be automated, whether it's an email task or SharePoint or Excel or some other automation process. All right, I'm going to pass control back, or you can grab control.
Thank you very much, Pat.
You're welcome.
Some really good examples here to think about. Our next poll question is basically, it's got kind of full in the blanks here. What's the #1 automation priority for your organization? What is it around? Is it around IT? Is it around finance, human resources, customer orders, or service, or another function? Okay, let's see our results. So somebody has other is actually the most common response, but IT and customer orders are kind of 25%, and then human resources, just a couple of responses there at 13. If you've got a question about a function that's not up here, that would be probably a really good trigger for Pat and for Roger to take a crack at. Some of you have asked me. I've been on the phone last several weeks talking about our RPA with various audience members, and they're saying, why is CM First partnered? Why do we partner with HelpSystems on RPA? Well, HelpSystems has been around since the early 80s, and they have deep experience with IBM I, especially. They're a big force in IBM I software and in software for power systems worldwide. We've got customers that are worldwide as well. The Automate solution has got a really nice price model that's affordable and also scalable. So it allows you to try, do a trial run or some test cases in a really cost-effective manner, which is not the case with other RPA vendors. And then you can scale up rapidly from there. Also, this solution works with RPG, COBOL, CA2E, CA Plex, and another technologies that we're quite familiar with, and so is our community. And last, Help has a lot of successful projects for IBM Power, and that was something that really got our attention when we were looking at RPA. I'm now going to turn the reins over to Roger Hammer, and he's our Director of Products and Services at CM First.
All right, thanks, Mark.
You're welcome, Roger.
What I've got today is 3 example bots that I'm going to run. So the first one is a desktop application built in C++ for Plex. The second one is a 5250 terminal emulation, CA2E. So we'll see these different examples. And then the third one is a Plex Java application, web application. So we'll see all 3 of the different approaches here for RPA in the IBM environment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kick off real quick. So just let me mention here a series of steps, right? So each of these is going to have somewhat of a similar process. The first one's going to check an input file. It's going to start up the application, and it's going to work through and open up that file and read it. And then it's going to actually delete some records looping through, and then it's going to actually use an API to place a card on the Trello board. So let's start this up and take just a second before the demonstration runs here. And you'll see, basically, I'm just doing a copy and paste here on the right of a file into a particular location where this application is watching for an input file. And then you'll see the application start up, and it's going to read that Excel file, CSV actually, and then it's going to go through that file and delete the records related to that information that it found. So it's going to delete them one at a time, popping up each record. And then as it completes the third record, you'll see over on the left that onboarding tracking list in Trello will have a new card created through the API call. Okay, there we go. So we got C++ running through and building that Trello card. Okay, we're going to transition now to the CA2E, the terminal emulation version. Similar process, but now we're going to add data after we read the Excel file. Again, looking for the input file. Once it detects the input file, it's going to start up the application and run through reading that CSV file and then entering, of course, getting to the first appropriate screen. Now reading the data and then entering that data just as a user would into that, as Pat called, front of glass application. Okay, it's going to enter again those 3 persons. This is an insurance type application, so it's entering these new insured people. Then it's going to again add a CA2E card to the process in the Trello card there. Now we're going to go to the last example, which is that Java Plex example. Same process actually as the previous, except now with a web application. So it's going to run through, pop up that browser this time after I paste that input file, bring the browser up. You will see me kind of move that over as it comes up to the left. So there are, and I'll show you after this completes, there are some delays here that sometimes are a little different depending on the application. You know, the process running on the CA2E terminal emulation you saw run really fast, a little bit slower maybe in the entries for the C++ application. But on the web, sometimes, you know, it takes a little bit longer to have those screens come up. So it's detecting when that screen is ready and is ready for the entry. So now there we are reading the data again, and now entering that data into the input form for this web application. Okay, add the new first user. Then it's going to come back and add the second and third user. And again, as it completes the process, we'll see the new Trello card show up on the left in the browser window for this time the Java application. Finishing up that third user. So you may notice there on the right in the folder, it actually deleted the file after it read that data. So the next file can come in, and now we have the final Java tracking card in Trello. All right, so let me bring up the live version here on my VM. And so we've got the task development tool. And so we've got actually 4 different steps. And as Pat mentioned, very easy to kind of define your process steps that you need to automate, drag the appropriate function or step over to the window, and then just enter the information about that step, whether that be, in this case, running my 5250 terminal emulation, waiting a few seconds for that to come up, entering, login information, literally keystrokes, entries to get that in, and getting to the correct screen. Once we're there, then we go through and execute a get function on an Excel file. This is a specific function available within Automate in order to access that data. I define the data set. So data sets are well understood, and it actually reads that data directly into a data set without me telling it how to do it. It basically detects the data and writes it into that data set. And of course, I tell it where to find the data. Once I've done that, then I'm deleting that file out of the way for the next run. Once that process is over, I'm just looping through the data set information and entering the correct keystrokes into the terminal emulation in CA2E here to get those entries added from the data set information. You can see, a multi-dimensional array. I'm stepping through that array of data to enter that data into each of the fields. You also might notice that some of those fields required tabs. Some didn't require anything after I completed the entry, and then at the end, we use an enter key to get things completed and saved. And then we use an API. So it did set up a few variables in this case. So we create a few variables. We create the type of information that we want to store in those variables. And then we get to the process of posting to a URL, an API URL, with the details of that URL to define exactly what we want to happen, in this case, on the Trello board. So we're creating a card, we're giving it a name. We actually have, in this case, a key we get from the Trello website. Also, the list ID, the details of that site, and then we just drop that into this post request so that URL will receive the correct information and complete the process. So all 3 of these tasks are very similar in that way. Okay, hopefully this has given you an idea of the kinds of things you can do. Real quickly, I might talk about, whole lists here of API options, cloud options, general controls, arrays, variables, all the different options there, file control, the GUI automation, and also integration, and then system options available. Lots of things, networking, printers, all the different types of things you might want access to from a system perspective to control these processes. Okay, as Mark said, we'll transition now back to Mark, and we'll wrap up with Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Amazing, a live demo that didn't crash. Well done. So we have another poll question at this juncture, and then we'll go into our Q&A. It's one that we've asked often before. So now, based on what you've seen this morning, what would you like to do? Would you like to have a meeting, or introduce us to someone on the team that's in charge of RPA, if you're not that right resource, or add me to your newsletter? That's something we have several different newsletters, but RPA will be a topic on our technology side. And then you want us to talk to another audience, or to have another conversation about this with other people that didn't get a chance to be on today's webcast. Anyway, we've got a variety of on the Mint topic of people who want meetings, as well as on the newsletter and talk. But what I have for everyone on the webcast today is we have a special offer to webinar attendees, and our offer is this: if we can, we'll help you develop one RPA business process with an experienced automation engineer. The fine print is that you've got to be actively engaged on this, and the scope must be accomplished, or must be a reasonable scope, something that can be accomplished in 30 days, so we can see very quickly whether RPA is going to be advantageous for you or not. So I'll be following up as director, following up with the people that were on this about that, and my counterpart Christoph will follow up with people from Europe who are on the call as well. And but anyway, that's our offer. We think seeing and experiencing this thing with a particular business process is the best way to kind of get your feet wet and see where this is going to work. Yeah, and then final call for questions. Pat, one question for you is, what's the typical ROI that you see on Automate projects?
It's kind of hard to say typical ROI because projects are so different, but fairly easy to be able to calculate it if you're automating manual tasks. I do have an example here. Carter Bank and Trust is one of our customers, and they saw 3,800% ROI in 5 months. What they were doing is, I believe that they had acquired a new bank, and they had to validate 300,000 customer accounts for their conversion to their core system, which they're running. I don't know if it's Fiserv or whatever, but the ability to have Automate do that was huge. Wow. Money saver for them. And that was where they started. And then since then, they've really grown, and they've got lots of different automation. He did a webinar with us a couple of weeks ago, I think. Maybe I can send a link over to you guys, and you can listen to it, because it's really, It's really good. So I don't know. I don't have a typical ROI, but certainly, you would get your investment back in months instead of years.
Right. Yeah, the examples I saw on your website were, it seemed like 1,000% wasn't that crazy,
Right. I know.
1,000% was typical. Roger, can you give me an example of a process that would not be advantageous for RPA?
Well, sure. I mean, it's kind of the opposite, obviously, of what is. So if it's kind of an inconsistent process, it's not always the same, it's not very repeatable, and you can't really predict the results. Maybe takes a lot of human decision throughout the process. So, your ideal processes are going to be those that, you do them regularly, you work through them, they're very repeatable, they're predictable, and kind of definable. There can be human interaction at times, potentially, but obviously you're looking for an ROI where you know, either you're taking the work out of the human hands because it's much more efficient, but also, as Pat said, I think just the accuracy and quality of the input can be significantly better where there's a lot of data entry and the data comes in, you know, in a consistent way that can be moved into an RPA process.
Well, question from the audience. What is the platform for Automate? This is for Pat. My company is moving off of the IBM to cloud-based solutions, and our audience member can see one application that Automate would help greatly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Automate is installed on a Windows platform. So we would install it on a Windows server. There are a couple different versions, but typically for an enterprise, you would install it on a server, and then we install a SQL database as well. And then you can, and then you deploy agents to those servers or workstations where you want to be executing tasks. Now for cloud, you know, definitely we can be installed on a cloud server. And if your application is like web-based or, you know, that it has some type of an API, we don't have to be installed up there where that, you know, where that application lives. We can reach it from that central server. So it is a Windows-based application. You can also get agents for Linux, I believe.
Okay, great, Pat. Follow-on question to that from another was, what does the price model look like for Automate?
Mm-hmm. So there are basically two versions of Automate. There's a single server. We call it a desktop version, but it could be installed on a server instead of a desktop. So everything is contained in that one instance. So you store your tasks there, you create your tasks there, and they execute from that server. So that's a single version. Then we have an enterprise version where you've got the central server that I was just talking about that's installed on a Windows server somewhere, and it has a database to hold all those tasks. In that case then, so you license that central server. There are developer tools that you would install on your workstation so you can create your tasks on your own workstation, develop them, and then store them on that central server. So there's you need a license for each of those developers. And I believe those licenses are concurrent. So if you have, you know, 10 people that might be developing tasks, you would need, you know, maybe 5 licenses because when you hit that limit, somebody would be booted off. And then there also is a license for the agents where tasks are going to be executing. So if you're going to be running tasks on, you know, multiple Windows servers, you'd want an agent over there. So the licensing model is you license the central server, you license each of the agents, and you license each of the developer tools. And then we have other licenses for test and HR or DR and HA, et cetera. But I think our pricing is a little bit different from some of our competitors in that sometimes they price based on the number of tasks that you're running, and we don't do that. We license this by software. So you just license the components of the software. You can run as many tasks as you want on there.
Great. Another one for Roger. Do you work with all 5250 emulators?
So yeah, so you saw my 5250 emulator running. Obviously, if you're running on Windows or Linux with the 5250 emulator, then certainly, you know, the functionality is going to be fine to work and interact with those emulators for IBM or mainframe or whatever type of application that you may have.
Well, I didn't see any other questions come in from our folks. So to that, we'll give people back a couple of minutes of their time from the hour. I want to remind everybody that there will be another webcast, community webcast coming up on April 1st of all days, and that's going to be focused on IBM with 2E and Plex, and we'll be talking about, amongst other things, about Broadcom roadmap and incremental release for that. And everyone who's registered for this webinar will also see an email invitation to that as well. So thank you to Pat and Roger for today's instruction on RPA. And thanks everybody, and happy spring break to all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.